Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Wayne Mullins is a husband, father of four, founder, CEO, entrepreneur, and author. He's a generous soul, a risk taker, and an out-of-the-box, against-the-grain thinker and leader. Over the past 20 years, Wayne Mullins has scaled multiple companies, helped hundreds of entrepreneurs do the same with their companies. He's influences over 250,000 entrepreneurs annually through his blogs, books, training programs, and he has personally worked with clients in over 100 industries. That's a pretty broad experience from every corner of the globe. Ugly Mug Marketing has won praises from some of the leading influences in the business world. And I am so excited to have Wayne Mullins on the Deal Quest podcast. Wayne, welcome.
Thank you so much, Corey. I'm excited for this conversation today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so listen, before we get into everything you do and your personal experiences and in terms of buying and selling companies now and how you work with clients. And even though it's on the marketing side, which we consider organic growth and not the topic of this podcast, it does influence, what they do in terms of their deal stuff. So we're going to look at that angle of it. But before we get into all of that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my bet is that owning a marketing company and, having bought and sell companies and doing all the stuff you do probably wasn't it at that age, but you tell me, maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think that was it. But to be honest with you, Corey, I don't know what was. I know from a very young age, though, I was very entrepreneurial minded. Yes. I do know that, when my friends would come over, I would actually pay them in baseball cards to go out and help me pick up 10 cans so that I could then take those 10 cans and go sell them and get some money for those cans. So I do remember that. I always did lawn care work growing up, from very, very early age. And so it's in my DNA, I guess, kind of this entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. And it's funny because you might have answered my second question, which I always ask, which is, what was your first deal that you could, remember of any type, even when you were a kid? And you just described a barter deal where you gave baseball cards in exchange for services, so, but anything else come to mind?
No, that was probably the very first deal I ever did. I remember specifically my parents weren't too happy when they found out because they're the ones who'd given me all those cards for Christmas. But I was after the money. So the cards had to go. I had to go trade in the cans and get the money.
So wait, so not only did you barter cards for money, but you actually bartered cards you didn't pay for. So it was free resources that you could trade.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely a good deal for you. I love that. It's funny because I'm sort of the same way. I was a born entrepreneur as well, and I have all these stories from when I was a kid and running businesses and having employees when I was 15 and blah blah blah. It's always fascinating to meet folks like that. And then, listen, there are some very successful situational entrepreneurs, like people who don't have that DNA, so to speak, from a young age, but they were in a particular situation and it came up. So it's always interesting to see the differences, of how people get to their entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess it goes back to the old question of, is it something you're born with, or is it something that you learn over time? And, from my experience, I would say, like you just said, it's a combination of both. It can definitely be learned. And I think some people, though, are just more wired that direction, by nature.
Yeah. And, and I feel like for me, although I did it for a period of time early in my career to gain experience, it's almost like I can't breathe if I'm not an entrepreneur. Like I could never imagine. I mean, listen, you never know what life brings you, but, I could never imagine going back And in fact, the one time that I was in a partnership, with my law firm, where I had merged my firm into someone else's, and they were really the major player, at least in the beginning, and it started feeling like a little bit like a job, like I didn't have control. I was like, all right, no, I'm unmerging. We're out.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I've had, since I graduated from school, I guess that was a little over 20 years ago, I've spent a total of 3 years working for someone else in that 20-year period. So I can relate.
Pretty impressive. I've got a friend who's in my entrepreneurs forum who actually never worked for someone else, at least not as an adult. He started a graphic design company on the side in college, and then just graduated and had a company. So I'm always like, like that amazes me, right? Any case, so let's talk a little bit about give people like beyond your bio, just a couple of minutes on what you do on the marketing side for companies, and then I want to go back to your personal deal experience, and then how what you do ties into even deals for clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a marketing perspective, typically clients who reach out to us, they reach a point where they realize that what has been taking place internally is no longer working. They've got, usually it's an employee or someone on their team who is fulfilling a role and doing marketing as well within their company. And so it's when they reach that point where they realize that they're leaving so much more on the table, that if they were strategic in the way they approach marketing, if they had someone who was dedicated to that, who was results, focused, that they could be accomplishing and achieving more. And so those are typically the companies when and where we get brought in. And that varies a little bit from company to company, but that's generally speaking where we come into the picture.
Great. In any particular sectors or industries or size or anything like that?
I wish, I've been given this advice so often that, if we just picked a niche or just picked a vertical and we dove into that, my life would be so much simpler, and, the systems and processes would all work so much better. But to be honest with you, Corey, I love the diversity. I love this morning getting to work on something for a nonprofit organization, and, this afternoon having a completely different conversation. Our clients range from, I would say that probably pretty much across the board, other than nonprofits, $1 million plus in revenue. Our largest right now is going to do this year somewhere around close to 600 million in revenue.
So, but yeah, broad range. Well, listen, it keeps it interesting. Trust me, I can relate to that, because I always had, a legal practice that represented clients across all kinds of industries, and we still do. And then I developed this niche in financial services with investment advisors. And so we sort of have a combination of both, because we've got half the firm that has a very, niche focus, and it's been great for us. And we have great referral sources, and we know the industry, and we systemize things, and we built a reputation. And if you Google RIA lawyer, we show up in the top 3, which is ridiculous because it's impossible. All that good stuff. But at the same time, the other half of the firm, we do all kinds of industries, and I think I love the investment advisor space. But if I only had that, I think it'd drive me crazy. I need some variety. So we do deals and contracts across, you name it, like you guys, we have so many other industries as well. So I get it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, so you have personal experience with doing a deal with selling a company, right? So let's talk about what was that company, and, how did it lead up to, to choosing to sell it, and, what did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this company, so when I first graduated from school, thanks to Zig Ziglar, who maybe you are familiar with and some of your listeners are familiar with, at one time, very popular motivational and sales trainer. Because of his influence, I knew I wanted to go into sales. So graduated from school, went into sales. And over the course of about a 2-year period, I really honed my sales skills. I was terrible at the beginning, got good. And at that point, I started looking at my paycheck, started looking at the amount of money I was bringing in for the company. And I was like, man, this gap is getting bigger and bigger here. Like, I need to do something about this. So I decided to go do something on my own. Like, what if I took those skills and went and did something for myself? At that time, the easiest thing that I knew to do was actually go back and cut grass and build a lawn and landscape company. And so over the course of a 3-year period, we took that company, I say we, it's my wife and I, but we took the company from zero and we grew it to a very large size company. It was at that point that it was either expand into other markets, other territories. So we're in a fairly small region. The population here, the biggest town's 48,000. Kind of the total area is probably about 100,000 in a 30-mile radius, something like that.
Let people know where you are.
Yeah, I'm in Alexandria, Louisiana. So if you look at Louisiana on a map, we're right in the middle of the state.
Yep.
I often say, if you think of Louisiana, you often think of New Orleans. And if you think of all the sights and sounds and the pictures and the images you would experience in New Orleans, now picture the polar opposite of that. That is Alexandria, Louisiana. That's where I'm at.
Love it.
Yeah, so it reached the point where it was generating very good revenue, very good profit, had all the systems and processes in place. It was to the point that the last year, I didn't spend any time outside whatsoever. My time was all spent, inside the office. And to be honest with you, I got kind of bored that last year. Mm-hmm. But the idea of expanding to this other territory, which was about 80 miles away, I just wasn't overly interested. At the time, my true knowledge about business, like actually operating a business, was very limited. I knew marketing, I knew sales, I did that well, but decided that I wanted to get out of it. So I called up a business broker, which we don't even have one here. I had to call one from a bigger city and said, hey, here's what I've got. Here's the company. I'll send you over the financials, which, I'd had an accountant doing our financials every month and all that stuff. So I had all that. And lo and behold, within 2 weeks, we had a couple of different offers on the company. And again, I went into this completely blind, Corey. Like I had no clue if I was getting a good deal, a bad deal. I was trusting this broker who I'd never met before. So that was my first experience in, growing a company and then exiting a company. And all that happened within a 3-year window. Yeah, it was an exciting time.
So in hindsight, you said you didn't, you were sort of a neophyte at that. You working with a broker you didn't know. In hindsight, are you happy with the deal that ended up occurring, or now that you're smarter and wiser, would you have done anything different?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020. Obviously, yes. I'm happy with the deal that went through because in the time it was a great deal for me. At least it looked that way on paper, and the check I received was good for me. But in hindsight, having knowing now what I know, if I could bring that backwards, I know for a fact with just making some tweaks in terms of the way we operated and tweaks in terms of the way that we handled expenses and we handled revenue, things like that, that the company could have sold for probably 2 to 3 times as much, had I just taken what I now know and brought it backwards. Yeah.
Listen, I love your attitude. It's not like would have done something different now because it doesn't mean you regret the deal then, right? Then was then. You're in the space you're in. You're happy with it, but we all learn and grow. I mean, I tell a story where I started my first business with employees when I was 15. I literally used to deliver flyers door to door in Brooklyn, and I had my friends and I got my own accounts. Right, I'd been working with somebody, got my own accounts. And I was making like $300 a week in the 70s as a 15-year-old kid, which was, stupid money, right? And then I went away to college and I just left the business. I had no idea. I didn't even understand you could sell a business. Like there was enterprise value. I had accounts. I had clients. I didn't even think to sell it. So, we all learn, So in terms of that, I just 1 or 2 more questions on that. We'll move on. But, in terms of that experience of working with a business broker, because that's a lot of small businesses have that, question. Hey, they're too small for an investment banker, right? So if they're going to get anybody interested, it'll be a business broker. I will tell you that, in my experience, there's let's say a very broad range of level of skill and integrity amongst business brokers, so, we don't have to name any names, whatever, but, what was that working with an intermediary generally? What was that experience like? What's the value of that? And do you see your clients nowadays? I know you work with clients who are doing deals. Are they working with some sort of intermediary as well?
Yeah. So for me, Corey, what I would say is that in that moment, in that time, it was the only option I really had. I just didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the network to make that happen. So for me, it was very much a transactional thing. They had a pool of potential buyers that were interested in businesses. I didn't know where to go find that, given the size and the the geography that we lived in. Yep. And so that transaction for me, though, there was not much value, I would say, brought to that in terms of, maybe we could have structured things differently and negotiated more. Maybe there was, and so, I don't discredit what they did or how they structured the deal or anything like that. I walked away happy, and I'm, still, like I said, it worked out well for the time. But what I would say is that, I would highly, highly recommend working with someone else who's been through it before. So even if you choose to go with a broker, find a peer, find a mentor, find someone who has either bought or sold before, because their knowledge in terms of, how to structure it, even the way that financials are put together, all that information can make such a big difference, not only in the sale, but then what takes place after the sale, the transition, how smooth that process goes. All of that stuff is just so invaluable. So I highly recommend work with somebody who's done it before. If you're novice and you don't know all the financial details and how to structure a deal and all that stuff, then definitely bring in some other outsiders to get second opinions on what's taking place.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. All right. So you sell this company, and then did you start your current company right after that, or were there other stops along the way?
Yeah, so it was very indirect. So in the course of growing that company over that 3-year period, we literally were from startup to, we were probably the largest in our region, which again, we're a small region. I'm not making it sound like we're, taking over the world here, but we captured a lot of attention because in that short period, we were nobody to now we're seen everywhere. And so it was in the course of that growth that clients of the lawn care company started coming to me and asking me for advice on how to grow their business. So we see you growing so quickly. What are you doing? Not only customers and clients of the lawn care company, but even other entrepreneurs in the area. I had some of them reach out to me. And it was as a result of some other entrepreneurs reaching out to me that I was actually co-owner in a couple of coffee shops for a while. During that time, they approached me, they pitched me a deal to go into that, to help them grow and scale that company. And so it was out of those conversations and kind of the side consulting things that I was doing that eventually the current company, Ugly Mug Marketing, would be born.
Got it. So let's talk about those coffee shops and those other little, businesses that, so, how were those deals structured, if you're willing to say? Were those the kind of thing where, hey, we see that you're great at marketing and sales, and we'll give you a piece of equity to do that? Was it an equity for services kind of arrangement? Did you invest? Anything you want to share on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the initial one was just equity for services. So they'd seen what I'd done there. Then we took that to the next level, that location to the next level. And so they were looking at a second location, opening up an additional location. At that point, they offered additional equity if I wanted to invest in that second location. So that took place as well. So then I've got pieces of both of these taking place. And both of those I took to the level where I thought that I could add value. And at that point, I actually exited both of those locations. So I walked away, they maintained the businesses. But again, it was taking what I knew from my experience, applying it in their specific industry, and in essence, created a very nice payday for me.
That's great. Yeah. And listeners, a few months from the time this will air, if you look back a few months, I don't have the episode number in front of me, but I did a solo cast on doing deals where you get equity for services and the potential ways you can structure it, the potential pitfalls. I think what happens is over your career, no matter what you do, if you're really good at it, you're probably going to get pitched those kind of deals from time to time, and the question is whether or not they make sense. And I'll give you the one bottom line tip, listeners, that I given that, but it's worth listening to that episode. And that is, I always say to folks, you should evaluate that like you're making an investment decision. So in other words, if somebody offers you equity for services, you should treat it as if you got paid for the services cash, and then you said, okay, am I going to invest that cash in this company, right, for equity? Because that's essentially what's happening. You're just missing a step. And if your answer is you wouldn't make that investment, then you may not want to do that equity for services deal, or you may want to do a partial deal and things like that. So in any case, I don't want to go too far on that. I did a whole solo cast on it. You can go check that out.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to corykupfer.com/assessment. That's corykupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
So wait, so then you exited those. Sounds like you sold the equity back or to the operating partners, the original clients of yours or partners of yours that were running the company?
Yes, that is correct. They bought back my share of the equity in those companies.
Great. So that's great. So, you got to monetize that. Sounds like at a nice profit. So now you start Ugly Mug Marketing, and again, so let's tie this over, right? Because as I mentioned in the intro, my listeners know we make a big distinction between organic growth, which marketing sales is on that side, and deals. But there are ways that you have some, I know, stories and examples that you can give us about clients you've worked with, where the organic growth support that you give has impacted their ability to do deals or, leverage them, put them in a better position. Certainly, maybe, I would assume to get better enterprise value or sales prices or, leverage or whatever. So let's talk about that a little bit. How does the work you do help your clients do deals, and, give us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our clients just recently, in the past 60 days, they were actually acquired by a large holding company. And we have been working with this client for about 2 years, give or take. I'm probably off a little bit on that, but about 2 years. And after the initial kind of onboarding with the client and, the general, here's what we're going to do and here's what we need you to do, the conversation kind of came up very subtly that they were looking for an exit. And so over time, those conversations shifted. And what that means for us is we needed to not only give credence or justice to marketing their existing products to the consumers out there, but we also needed to ensure that the messaging that was taking place was attractive and appealing to prospective buyers.
Yes.
And so the biggest, I'm going to jump to the end and then I'll come back, but the biggest takeaway is this, that if you are positioning yourself for acquisition, you want to treat that audience as a potential marketing person. In other words, your messaging, the way that things get communicated, you need to have that person, that audience in mind with everything you're doing from a marketing perspective, because they're watching those things, or they're going to look at them at least when they do their due diligence on your company. So what I would say is that there are different types of organizations that are taking place. And one is the scale side. So when we're coming in, somebody's looking to scale. And there's marketing things that are done around that. And that's organic, what you're talking about. There's a lot in that particular space. The other side of that is the selling side. And so for us, when we're working with these clients, we actually help position them and their ads around where the conversations had started with prospective buyers. So we wanted marketing messages to show up in the areas and around the topics of this particular industry that we were working with. So again, I think one of the best examples I've ever heard of this or read of this was, I forget the exact title of the name of the book, but it's the biography written about Elon Musk. And in that biography, the author goes into great detail about how when Elon Musk had his company, I think it was X.com maybe, and they had merged with PayPal, how every single thing they did was crafted around the ability to attract investors into that organization. And so for anyone listening, what I would say is that if that is where you're going, in other words, you're looking to be acquired, you're looking to sell, make sure that that is in your mind as you're doing your other marketing as well. Make sure you're speaking to those prospective buyers as well.
I love that. And it's interesting because the default thinking is that, well, I mean, when you do marketing, it's to your customers and clients or prospects, right? That's what you do marketing for. And I love this perspective because it comes up in several, one of the things I talk about with a lot of my financial industry clients is, they're looking to bring in other assets in the management, other advisors, people who manage money. And I always ask them, what is your value proposition to these folks? And that is a different value proposition than they have to their customers and clients, right? Those people, they actually manage the money. And it's especially true in the financial services industry because it's super competitive to get great talent and people who control money. And a lot of times they haven't thought about it before. And it's a similar thing, right? It's another constituency or stakeholders, or what we're going to call a market, right? That you need to have a message to. And, or I say the same thing on the buyer side, right? Why should somebody, I mean, especially in any industry where it's competitive, we have a lot, I mean, financial services, tech, healthcare, there's a lot of industries where there's a lot of competition for deals right now, even with the bumps in the stock market and everything, there's still a lot of money out there. And it's really a seller's market. So, the way you communicate the value proposition of why somebody should sell to you, right, is the other side of what you're talking about. And I raise that with clients all the time. Do you work with clients on that side as well? The buying side, where they're creating a message that might attract other companies who might want to join them?
So not directly. One of our companies that we work with right now, they're in a huge acquisition phase. So they've gone in the past probably 4 years. They've gone from 2 or 3 locations to now they're at 53 locations in probably 7 states, something like that. And so we're working with them on their marketing, and then as they acquire, we take over marketing of the new locations. But again, I think part of that marketing message is the same. So in other words, when they're going out to pitch to acquire another company, those owners are looking back and seeing what's taking place. How are they treating their team members, right? And all of those things, if done thoughtfully, can be reflected in your public marketing. And when an acquisition does take place, one of the things that, again, we could dive down this rabbit hole or not, but one of the things that we do help people do is how do you actually market to the team, to the employees, the team members on the company you've just acquired? Because depending on the way the acquisition's taken place, and we've worked with clients on both sides where it's publicly known ahead of time, both employees on the new team you're acquiring know about it. But we've also worked on the other side where day one, they come in, they take over email, they take over everything. By the way, we're the new owners. Welcome to the team. And so we do work with them on what is the messaging? How do we communicate what is about to take place? Because anytime there is change, so in an acquisition, either side of the table, anytime there is change, there is going to be loss, or at least perceived loss. And so when I'm speaking to that, I'm speaking from the team member's perspective. So the people who work for the company that just got acquired, in their mind, they're losing something. They're giving up something. Even though things may actually get better, they're losing the fact that things are no longer going to be the way they were. And so anytime there's loss, there's going to be grief. In other words, they're going to go through a grieving process. And if you can help them walk through that grieving process quickly, help them overcome the belief that the losses are going to be worse than they are, the sooner you can get back up to production levels, and the sooner you don't have to worry about team members exiting and all the gossip that takes place, the water cooler talk and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no question. And that is, I have this 10-step video that I talk about in terms of doing deals. And one of the steps that I talk about is the communication strategy externally and internally, right? The communication strategy to all the stakeholders. And you're absolutely right. The employees are definitely one of those. And that's a place where, you see in the post, if you do a debrief of various deals, you see where, some companies have done it really well and some companies have not done it well at all. No matter when it's been, it's always a mistake not to do that well. And certainly in a time now when talent is tough to find, right? And the job market's tight, you certainly don't want to be alienating good folks and losing them or having them be demotivated. That could really adversely affect the value of what otherwise might look like a great deal. So that communication strategy work that you guys do internally with the, for the employees is absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other component of that is the way that it's presented and packaged, right? So, I mean, you can send something out that is just an email, and that's going to communicate even though it's the same words, that's going to communicate the message one way. Or you could print a letter and you could hand address it to each person, same exact words, it's going to communicate a message differently to that person. And so one of the things that we talk with them about is perception becomes reality.
Sure.
And so the way that they perceive those initial messages and that initial communication is going to set the tone for the relationship going forward as you're bringing them into, your company or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Do they feel valued? Do they feel heard and seen? Are there, you talk about loss. No question. And risk. I mean, Jeff, I have a phenomenal employee who is, but anytime we change anything significant, I'm not even talking about M&A level. I'm talking about, a new system, a new hire, she's just, one of those people who doesn't love change. Right. And she's gotten so much better. She's, so even in that mini situation, I'm always thinking, okay, how am I going to communicate to her the value and how this is going to be good for the company and good for her in the long run? And, so she, is open to it. Because, listen, resistance from employees, I mean, whether it's adoption of a new software system or whatever, I hear people all the time in the entrepreneurial community as going around and asking, oh, which CRM should we use? Or which, and the answer from every professional, the first one is, whichever one your people will actually use, if it's got 20 more bells and whistles, but they're not going to use it, it's not, that's not the choice. So,
Absolutely.
Good stuff. So listen, with your experience, any other things that come up, any other lessons or things that you think might be valuable in terms of the role that you've played, on maybe how marketing relates to, successful deals or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I just think that, it's the intentionality. So whether you're scaling, whether you're selling, or whether you're maybe doing succession planning, the intentionality behind the messaging matters. And I think a mistake that so many make is that they think of marketing as this thing we do to the public or we do for the public, for the prospects. But in reality, marketing is about communication. It's about persuasion through your messaging. And so it's with intention that you can smooth so many of the obstacles, so much of the resistance by clearly articulating, clearly marketing internally, whether that's to your team that, you're about to sell or you're about to buy, or you're about to have a bunch of new teammates because we're acquiring, whatever that may be, or succession, same thing. So it's about communication, but what I would say is it's not just about saying the things. It's about crafting those things in such a way that are meaningful to them. And that in and of itself is marketing. It's just that internal marketing that's taken place.
Love it. Love it. So I have another question for you. It's not necessarily directly deal related, but I'm curious because, you are in this small market, right? But yet you've worked across industries, across geographies, et cetera. So how does a small company, other than the fact that obviously you're great at marketing because that's what you do, so that would be the easy default answer, right? How does a company in a small market like yours get the kind of clients and reach that you've been able to do?
Yeah, the answer, Corey, I would say is we play the long-term game. So we're not playing the short-term game. And in the early years, that is very costly. In other words, there's things we could have done with our resources in terms of money and ad spend and marketing that would have produced much quicker returns for us. But we are playing the long game. So we are investing in relationships. We've been fortunate to work with a few different New York Times bestselling authors. And all of those come to us through referral, through word of mouth. We got clients in Hollywood and Beverly Hills right now. We're working with a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills who was the original Dr. 90210 back when that series launched. And again, it's because we've invested in these relationships and we play in this long-term game in terms of our marketing. So it's not about a transaction for us, it's about a relationship. And at the end of the day, it really goes back to what we all know to be true, is that when you treat people as human beings and when you do what's truly in their best interest, at some point that's going to come back to you. And for us, it certainly has.
That's great. Yeah, listen, it seems like you built a phenomenal company. It's, you love what you do. I I mean, obviously, it's not all what you do. We focused on the deal angle of it here because that's what this podcast is about. But you do all kinds of marketing, for various companies, and and serve them in various ways. I appreciate you bringing your deal angle to it for this purpose. So if people want to find out more about your services, whether they're related to deals or just related to general marketing, external or internal, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, the best place is just simply our website. It's just uglymugmarketing.com. Got our email addresses, phone numbers, all the other stuff's right there on the website.
All right. I was going to go to my final question, but I realized I have one in between. Any story behind Ugly Mug coming up with the name?
Yeah, actually there is. So there's this gentleman by the name of David Ogilvy, who was a very popular marketer. He grew a firm called Ogilvy and Mather. At one point, they were the largest in the world. Yep. They're still in the top 10 offices literally around the world. But David Ogilvy had this saying inside his offices that was this: I would rather see an ad that's ugly and effective over one that's beautiful but isn't. And so, for those not familiar with our industry, the marketing advertising industry, so much of our industry is driven by attempting to win awards, so the most creative design, the most this, the most that. And so for us, from day one, I wanted to set our North Star not on winning awards, not on what's beautiful, but on what matters most. And that is the results for our clients.
Love that. Love that story. Wayne, my final question of the podcast is always about my highest ideal in life, which is freedom. And for me, that's means freedom for all people, from oppression in the world to why I'm an entrepreneur and haven't had a boss in decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Yeah. So my answer, Corey, is this, that, I think for me, freedom, at one point, I clumped it as just this one word, like freedom's freedom. But what I've learned over my journey is there's actually two different types of freedom. There's freedom from, and there's freedom to. And most entrepreneurs, I believe, are seeking freedom to set their own schedule, freedom to take off when they want, freedom to make as much money as they want, freedom to do all these things. But what often I think happens is we end up in this trap of we merely have freedom from. We now have freedom from our boss who used to tell us what to do. And so for me, it was this process of learning the difference between freedom from and freedom to, and understanding what's required to make that jump or that bridge connect.
All right. So I've got to ask one follow-up, which is, and I know this is probably something we can spend hours on, but highlights of what you think is required to make that jump you just talked about. Yeah.
I think, not to dive into the whole subject, but I believe there's a big difference between growth and scale. And when you're truly scaling, it's not necessarily about a revenue number. It's not even necessarily about a rate of growth. What scaling is where it's no longer 1 + 1 = 2. It's about synergy. And the key component for entrepreneurs is that synergy must take place without you. In other words, your business is scaling when your inputs no longer matter. You're still growing. The growth is taking place because of other people's inputs, and those inputs are synergistic. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = some multiple. So that would be skirting kind of around, but that's, I think, the core of that. It's got to be about the systems, the processes that are in place, the culture that is in place that enable you to have freedom to do those things.
I love that. And listen, folks, I mean, I've seen so many entrepreneurs, and I've been in stages, of this earlier in my career before I started to understand some of the stuff that you're alluding to, where, we scaled, and what it caused me to have is actually much less freedom, less time, right? Because it was still dependent upon me. And what scaling meant was that, my freedom to control my schedule, my time, where I put my energy and passion actually reduced, right? Because it was too dependent upon me. So I love that distinction, which is why I wanted to explore it a little more. Wayne, thank you so much for being a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you so much, Corey, for your time. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your deal quest will bring.